The Joe Rogan Experience.
This theme of transitions and developing frames where other people don't have them, like it's so interesting how it's manifest in every art.
In everything.
Like I remember when I was playing chess, because I was a chess player from age 6 to 23. That was my first art.
Well, you weren't just a chess player. You were a chess player they made a movie about, dude.
Yeah,
I gotta say
didn't have much to do with me, man.
Well,
they did that,
Searching for Bobby Fischer is about you, bro.
Yeah.
You know, which has got to be weird.
Many moons ago. That was fucking weird.
Was it weird, the dramatic representation of your life versus the real life? Like, what is that juxtaposition like? Is it bizarre watching a fake version of you on television or on a screen, rather? And did you have, like, a feeling like, am I that person? I'm not that person. Like, I'm me. This is not really me, but it's about me.
Yeah. So the book came out when I was 11 years old. My dad actually wrote the book. He was a writer, and he ended up just writing about the journey from me starting to play chess to winning my first national championship. And when the book came out, it felt like I read it, and it felt true. I was a little pissed off because I didn't want people to know when I cried. I was an 11-year-old. I didn't want to be vulnerable, right? But like that felt like, and that was my first real thrust into like some degree of spotlight. And I was the national champion at that point, and I was each year for those years. So like I was at the top of the chess world, the youth chess world, and then I had the movie come out, the book came out. And then when the movie came out, it was a shit show. I hated the movie when it first came out.
Why'd you hate it?
Because I thought it had nothing to do with my life. Years later, I was able to see it as a work of art separate from my life and see it that way. And I was able to see how it was thematically true in many ways to themes in my life. Mm-hmm. But like my first teacher, Bruce Pandolfini, who's still a very dear friend of mine, Ben Kingsley played him as this mean guy. And,
right.
And I've had terrible coaches in my life. I've had coaches who were super destructive. But Bruce wasn't. He was beautiful and loving and helped me discover my love for chess. My first coaches were the Hustlers in Washington Square Park and Bruce Pandolfini together. And the way that was represented, I didn't like it. They also combined a bunch of characters in Washington Square Park, the Hustlers, they combined them into one in a way that, you know, was thematically true but didn't feel... So like when you're a kid, you're a teenager, you see all the difference. A movie comes out about your life. You see all the differences as opposed to the similarities. And it was... Yeah, and I felt really guilty about it relative to Bruce. That was a big part of it because I love Bruce.
Did you talk to him about it?
Oh, yeah.
What was his take on it?
I mean,
was he named Bruce in the movie?
Yeah, he was named Bruce in the movie, and he honestly he loved it. I mean, it put him in the spotlight as like the chess teacher in the country, in the world. So he rolled with it really well. I was just sensitive to all these mean-spirited things that happened between us in the film that never happened in life.
Right.
And years later, like those things did happen to me. And actually, during those years, when it came out, they were happening to me then. What was interesting is I had some really destructive coaches during that time. And I didn't put that on Bruce. But also what happened with the movie is that I loved chess so deeply. It was my first form of self-expression. And up until the film came out, it was just sort of this pre-conscious, innocent form of play, of battle, of like it was my jiu-jitsu mats. It was I fucking loved it. And then the movie is what pulled me into self-consciousness for the first time. I started thinking about, instead of losing myself in thought, I started thinking about how I looked to groupies, to cameras, to the rest. And so like I moved from self-expression to self-consciousness to being locked up. And then, and I didn't ask for it. I didn't decide I want to have a movie. This thing was done. And it was ultimately, I mean, I'm grateful for it. From my perspective now, the existential crisis that happened was awesome for me. It forced me to become more complicated as a human and integrate a sense of consciousness into my relationship to something. So my perspective on it now is that it was a beautiful journey. It made me grapple with a lot of shit. I didn't become reliant on a flower garden in order to have a deep relationship to an art. But at the time, I was very conflicted about it. And then when I graduated high school, I took off and left the U.S. for a couple of years, lived in Slovenia with my girlfriend at the time, to get away from the spotlight, to get away from the media, get away from all the shit that was connected to the movie. And that was when I started studying East Asian philosophy and meditating and started reading Jack Kerouac and existentialist literature and trying to figure myself out, figure the world out, figure out how I related to these things in some empty space.
Well, it's a tremendous burden to place upon a young person to take their life, which is essentially anonymous, to the general public, known in the chess world, obviously, but in the general public,
Yeah.
anonymous, and then all of a sudden a movie star. And not a movie star in the sense that you're on the screen, but it's about you, which is probably even weirder. So you have these false expectations or false narratives of how your life played out and who the people and who the piece. And so everywhere you run into people, they have a version of you that they've seen that's not real,
And they think they know you very intimately,
which is weird.
but they don't. Same, I mean, with you, you're so public, right? Most people think they know who you are and what
But
you
at least
think.
they know me from me talking.
Yeah, that's a really good
They
point.
don't know me. Imagine if like Mario Lopez played me in a movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's someone less handsome than Mario Lopez. And then you would have this thing where like, oh, you're the guy that guy played in the movie. And I'd be like, yeah, but that's not really that's not really me. I didn't have that problem. This is not real. That's
Right.
fake.
And also, when you're a teenager, you're susceptible to all of the temptations. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, suddenly you've got groupies everywhere, and that's awesome, and it's a lot of fun. But it's not necessarily consistent with sitting for 6 hours at a time in competition playing chess.
No,
With,
it's probably
like,
destructive to it, right?
Quite destructive. Yeah, which is interesting, and you have to integrate all of that.
How old were you when the film came out?
15.
Yeah, that is a crazy time to get any kind of attention because you're just getting testosterone for the first time. You're like, what is all this, right?
Yeah.
And your body's growing.
And it
you're
was flowing hard.
Yeah, and you're becoming a man. Now all of a sudden girls like you. Like, what?
Yeah.
What is this about? This is craziness.
I already had a very strange life because, and I think like a foundational part of my psychology came from. So I started playing chess when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 7, I was the top-rated player for my age in the country. My first national championship, I got my ass kicked, which was tremendous. It was great. Last round, I lost last round of my first nationals. I lost to the guy who later became my best friend for many, many years, David Arnett.
And you say tremendous because was that like a jumping point for improvement for you?
Because I didn't learn that I could win without getting my ass kicked first. I had to grapple with my demons, and the year from then to winning my first nationals the next year was when I really developed a love for chess, and I had to work very hard, and I didn't associate winning the nationals with talent or a smooth trip or all the bullshit that people can connect when they're called a prodigy from the outside. Mm-hmm. It's not a term I ever related to myself at all, but like when these labels are put on from the outside, and if you win too fast, too young, you can just develop this brittle relationship to success and to work and to training and to everything. Right? You don't realize that getting your ass kicked is a huge part of the journey.
That's a problem with very talented fighters as well. A lot of very talented martial artists, they never develop the discipline to truly become great because like from the very beginning they had whatever the advantage was, whether it's a speed advantage, a strength advantage. I mean, genetics plays such a large part in martial arts success. If you have someone who's an elite mind, who is incredibly disciplined and also has great genetics, you get a Mike Tyson.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
If you can have that combination.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
That's what you're looking for. But if you don't have that, and Mike Tyson is competing in your division, you're fucked. Like you can be really disciplined, but like so genetics do they do play a factor. Circumstances, coaching, there's a lot of different factors. But if you're a real prodigy, and there are people out there that are just extraordinary from the beginning, I find that if success comes too quickly, you don't develop the mettle to really push through boundaries and reach new levels. Because the only way you get there is through, you have to, I think oftentimes training becomes regimented, it becomes something you do. You see incremental growth and improvement, you get confidence, but then when you compete, if you get your ass kicked, then you have to kind of reassess everything. Like, okay, was I working at 10 or was I working at 8? Was I studying tape or was I fucking off and calling girls? Was I paying attention to my training routine and my recovery, or was I just training and partying? Like, what was I doing wrong? Like, what led this person to land those shots? What led this person to beat me?
Yeah.
And if you don't have those moments where you lose, I don't think you ever really achieve your true potential because you have to be challenged. And the best expression of challenge is total humiliating defeat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so consistently, the biggest losses, the most crushing losses, are what lead to the biggest wins later.
Yes.
Sometimes many years later, but it like that. And people often, I remember I was giving a simultaneous chess exhibition for a charity when, in my 20s somewhere, and this guy introduced his son, and he said his son hadn't lost a chess game in 2 years. And he was so proud. And it's just like, I knew it was a fucking train wreck. I mean, the kid, the kid obviously just was only choosing people to play who he could beat. Wouldn't
Right.
compete up in tournaments. Would only play down. And he was the only kid who didn't want to play against me in the simul. And so his life was protecting this perfect thing, right?
Oh.
People who don't lose. So in my chess life, the interesting thing that happened in my psychology is that I was the top rated player for my age in the country from a young age, but I always played up. I always played against adults, except for nationals and worlds. I played up, and all of my rivals were targeting me because I was the top seed in youth events. But their coaches and were much stronger players than me. They were adult international masters, grandmasters, and they could see all my weaknesses, psychological, technical, everything. And so if I ever made a mistake, the weakness was exploited until I took it on. And so I developed from a really young age this relationship to training, which was, if I didn't take on my weakness, I got my ass kicked and I felt pain. And so not taking on my weakness became outside of my conceptual scheme. So from age 8, and it can be a blind spot, like today in life, like a criticism of me that certain loved ones would have is that I love training. I love pushing my limits as a way of life in whatever I'm doing. If it was chess, if it was fighting, now it's foiling, surfing, and then foiling in the biggest waves I can find. And like just if I'm playing at my edge, I feel it feels beautiful. It feels like where I want to be. But the comfort zone doesn't feel beautiful. And to me, that works really well. But it's a big part of like my foundation in that was when being 8 years old and being targeted 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, my whole life. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that it was actually outside of my conceptual scheme not to take on the weakness because it was just connected to pain from such a young age as a competitor. And there's no luck in chess. There's no fucking luck in chess. If you have if you're playing chess, if you have an opening repertoire that's massive and you go into a game and there's one little place that there's a weakness and you don't want your opponent to go, he always fucking finds it. You don't know why. You never like make a move and hope he doesn't see it, or let's set this trap and it's not the best move, but maybe he'll fall into it. No, that never works at a high level. So you have to take your shit on.
So you associate not taking it on with pain.
Yeah, I don't anymore. I did young, and now I don't associate it with anything. I just don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
Unless I try.
That's a better way to handle it. To recognize there's a real process. There's the right way to do this. It's the only way to do this. So don't even think about the other way.
Right. But if it's kind of driving you, for me, I think it's healthier for me to recognize that pattern in myself and then roll with it, as opposed to just not even see, like, that it's there.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Acknowledge. Well, you have to have acknowledgement of it because you have memories.
Like if I'm cooking a turkey, I have to cook a world-class turkey. I have a friend, Jim Detmer, who says to me, Josh, what you have to do is cook a terrible turkey. Just cook an average turkey. Don't crush it. In other words, like it's an interesting thing when you become present to the fact that you have this like youthful story running through everything you do, and you can choose to live that way. But it's good for it to be a choice as opposed to just driving you.
It's definitely good for it to be a choice. It's always good for it to be a choice because sometimes life will, there's a curve that you have to take and you have to put something aside for a bit or maybe forever. And you have to be able to transition to something else. And if you can't do that, then you'll be stuck.